2024 is here, and a lot of people are asking the same question. What is going to happen this year? What are some big predictions? What are some outlier events that I need to keep an eye on? That's why we've got our man for big predictions on the scene, Jim Rickards, a man who called Trump's unlikely victory the Brexit. He's been ahead of all the interest rate hikes of 2022, market crashes. He called the Green New Scam. He called the term Biden bucks. The man is ahead of a lot of things. And right now, we want to hear his take on 2024. Jim, I know that you've got two stocks you like, and you've got a big prediction. There could be an energy disaster setting up, recession. It ties into your Green New Scam thesis and what Biden and the Democrats are doing here in America. So let's get to it. What are those two stocks, and what's your big prediction for 2024?
Well, I've got two predictions, but I want to kind of broaden it a little bit. My recommendation is I have two stocks: Chevron, New York Stock Exchange, ticker CBX, and ExxonMobil, New York Stock Exchange, ticker XOM. And when you say, okay, I'm recommending energy companies, people go, well, that must mean oil prices are going to go up a lot because, it's good for energy stocks. And I just gave a recession deflation scenario. So how do you kind of reconcile those two things? I just want to spend a couple of minutes on energy prices in general and why I like those two stocks, whether oil prices go up or down. And again, I'll explain why. Energy market is extremely difficult to analyze, but one of the reasons for that is because there's a huge market manipulation political component to it. So there's a long list of factors we would look at. Obviously we look at supply and demand, broadly speaking, geopolitical factors, including relations between U.S. and Iran, U.S. and Saudi Arabia, other key linkages between Saudi Arabia and China. You got to look at interest rates, exchange rates, pumping logistics, transportation logistics, new oil discoveries, refinery capacity, new technology, and of course, fracking revolution is old news at this point, but that's an example of how technology really can revolutionize the industry. And these factors have to be put in the context of geopolitical unrest, including the war in Ukraine, the war between Hamas and Israel, the chances of escalation in both of those wars to the point of the use of nuclear weapons, and the financial sanctions which have been wrapped around Russia and the rest of the world as a result of that. And I'm not a meteorologist, but I always say don't forget the weather. The Russians have a name for weather. They call it General Winter. General Winter is one of their commanding officers, and the Russians know how to fight in winter, and most armies don't. So that gives them an advantage. Last year, Europe skated through what could have been an energy disaster because it was a fairly mild winter, and they took some steps to increase their natural gas imports. And by the way, Europe is still buying enormous amounts of natural gas from Russia, as much as any. Russia's hard currency revenues from energy sales, oil and natural gas, are at all-time highs. So don't believe what you read in the New York Times. They're not starving. They're not shut out of the markets. The boycotts don't work. The sanctions don't work. And they're still selling plenty of energy to Europe. And by the way, the pipelines go through Ukraine. It's like, the Russians are paying Ukrainians usage fees to run the pipelines, and Europeans are paying the Russians for the energy in the middle of a war between Russia and Ukraine. So I guess we're financing both sides, but nothing particularly unusual about that. But my bigger point is, every factor I just mentioned, I'm not going to repeat them all, but interest rates, exchange rates, wars, geopolitical, et cetera, they could apply to any analysis. They could apply to any stock or any commodity. So what is it that is really special about the energy market? I mentioned at the beginning, it's the big three. It's the United States, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. Those three countries produce a little over 30% of the total oil supply in the world. They dictate the prices. There's no question about it. Not just Saudi Arabia, by the way. The U.S. and Russia are a very big part of that. So it's market manipulation by sovereign states that sets oil apart from almost any other market. Oil is the blood in your system. You simply can't do it without it. If we have a copper shortage, okay, the price goes up, construction slows down, mining output maybe increases, you do something about it, but you muddle through. It's not the end of the world. With energy, it's different. When shortages develop, the lights go out, heating systems fail, air conditioning goes off, the power grid can collapse. transformers explode, and military capacity can be highly degraded. People die. That's what happens when there's an energy shortage. So it's really up to the big three to make sure that doesn't happen. My point being, energy is too important to be left to markets. Of course, markets play a role, but the geopolitics of those three countries deciding what's in their best interest. Now, right now, we have a very good example of that, which is Saudi Arabia has reduced output and encouraged others to do likewise to prop up the price. Why are they doing that? Well, they've got goals. They want oil to be around $75 a barrel. They might love it to be higher, but they need it to be $75 a barrel because that's how much revenue they need based on output just to meet their budget. I mean, they got a lot of mouths to feed, as the saying goes. The fundamental case for oil prices is weak. So I'll come back to the geopolitics, but the fundamental case, with WTI futures on the NYMEX hit 93.68 per barrel on September 27th, just a few months ago. There it dropped to 82.31 on October 5th, 12% drop in 1 week. A little bit of a rebound on the massacre of Jews on October 7th. But that once it appeared that it was a war between Israel and Hamas, but the fear of escalation dialed down a little bit. So the decline in oil prices continue. And we were at 69.50 a barrel today. That's a peak to trough drop of 26% from the late September high. That's the trend. And it's consistent with everything else I just said, which is that inflation is coming down, not for good reasons. Inflation is coming down because we're heading into a recession. When you get into a recession, you should expect commodity prices to drop and oil prices to drop with them. The recession signs are real. They're growing worse. Credit contraction, rising bad debt, increasing jobless claims, collapsing commercial real estate markets, contracting world trade, inverted yield curves, and a number of other technical indicators. In fact, as I mentioned, the recession may already be here. Interest rates typically peak after a recession begins. A lot of people don't get that, but this goes, take your time series back as far as you like. So when you get into a recession, don't interest rates come down? In the end, they do, but at the beginning, they go up because revenues are drying up, margins are contracting, companies need working capital, so they actually borrow, use up their lines of credit, et cetera. That tends to increase interest rates when the recession has already begun. But then within a month or two of the recession, as things get worse, yes, then interest rates come down because bad debts stack up, banks tighten their lending standards, et cetera. So the fact that interest rates have already peaked, kind of November 1st was the peak in the yield to maturity on the 10-year Treasury note, which is a good proxy. Everyone looks at LIBOR, or overnight rates, repo rates, SOFR, which et cetera. That's important for leveraged investors, for hedge funds, even for banks, if you're financing things in an overnight market. But if you're getting a mortgage, if you're doing construction, if you're doing a long-term fixed asset investment, the 10-year note is a much better proxy. Those are 5 to 10-year horizons, and that's how you have to think about financing them in the bond market. So that peaked around November 1st, and it's been coming down, which tells me that the recession has already started, consistent with the consumer hitting the brakes in October. So that's a lot of data. But if that were all we had, you just say, hey, oil prices are coming down. Could be down to $45 a barrel. That would not be a big surprise under those conditions. But this is where the market manipulation comes into play. I mentioned Saudi Arabia wants higher oil prices. The U.S. wants higher oil prices for completely different reasons. We have the Green News scam running 24/7. Biden depleted the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So now they're going to fill it up at higher prices. It's typical Biden policy. But the point is, the Greenies, Jennifer Granholm, Secretary of Energy, Biden, and the rest, they want higher energy prices. Sorry, they want higher oil and gas prices because they're trying to cram, electric vehicles down everyone's throat. They're non-economic. By the way, the peak in electric vehicles was 1910. They were pretty popular between 1900 and 1910. They were invented in 1837. The only ones using them in the 1950s were the East German Postal Service. They had a fleet of electronic vehicles. There's a reason why the electronic vehicle was obsolete in 1910. Batteries. Guess what? Hasn't changed. Yeah, batteries are a little more efficient, but you got to pull over this 300-mile stuff. Forget it. I mean, and people forget that in the winter, I have a six-cylinder, 24 valve, 350 horsepower engine. But when I want heat in my car, it's free because the engine's hot. So they just blow the hot air into the cabin and I stay warm. If you want heat in an electric vehicle in a Tesla, guess where it comes from? Comes from the battery.
Hmm.
So, so that's how they run the heater. So you're using your battery up faster. You can't even go as far. They got all kinds of problems, but like I say, it's an obsolete technology except for golf carts. So I'll grant that electric golf cart is a good way to do it. But the government's pushing them as a matter of policy, ideology, really. And so they need higher oil prices to make the really lousy alternative look better by comparison. So the US has got an extra grind. Of course, Russia wants higher oil prices because they're fighting a war. So the big three all have their own reasons for pushing prices higher. What could make oil prices a lot higher? Well, a Houthi missile that hits an oil tanker in the kind of around the Gulf of Aden or the Red Sea. The war in Israel, Gaza escalates to the point where you got to take out the Iranian Navy, which Ronald Reagan did, by the way. That's not a stretch. He actually did sink a lot of Iranian Navy vessels. Iran retaliating by closing the Straits of Hormuz. Hezbollah escalation. They're a closer Iranian proxy than Hamas. Hamas is on the payroll, but Hezbollah is the real Shiite end of the Shiite crescent, as they call it. They've been ratcheting up their activities. And the Houthis, of course, Biden took them off the terrorist watch list. Nice going, Joe. They're the ones firing drones at Israel and trying to hit tankers and commercial shipping in the Red Sea. So that escalation potential is there. So just to kind of summarize, the lower price factors kind of come down to one thing, which is recession. I could give you 20 reasons why we're in a recession, but that says it all. The higher price factors, Russia, US, and Saudi all have their own reasons for higher prices. We could be in for a really bitter cold winter. I think the weather might work in favor of higher energy prices this year, financial sanctions and the Green New scam. So then getting back to Chevron and ExxonMobil, it's like, well, okay, Jim, which is it, higher oil prices or lower oil prices? I just painted two scenarios where the likely outcome is much lower oil prices, but you cannot discard the potential for much higher oil prices based on one or more of those factors coming into play. So don't you have to pick one or the other to recommend the energy stocks, Chevron and ExxonMobil? The answer is no, because they do well in both states of the world. They're big companies. They've got a lot of planning. They've got a lot of capital expenditures. They've got a lot of levers they can pull. The easy one is higher energy prices. Yeah, that will absolutely benefit. By the way, just before I finish, I should disclose I do own a small position in Chevron. And so just put that on the table. I will not sell it without notifying all our readers. I have no intention of selling at the moment, but if that changes and I decide to sell it, I won't sell it before we notify our readers. So everyone will have a heads up on that if and when the time comes. But that said, yeah, higher oil prices clearly benefit Chevron and ExxonMobil, but lower oil prices can benefit them as well because you can't look at any one factor in isolation. A world of disinflation, a world of recession where energy prices are coming down, guess what else is coming down? Their costs. So interest rates that they pay, labor costs, transportation costs, et cetera. So the margins can actually expand. And that's how you judge a stock, basically, their margins and on profitability. In addition to that, Chevron and ExxonMobil have both announced major acquisitions in the past 6 months. They haven't closed yet. They're in the process of closing, but there are huge economies of scale that are going to come out of that have not been fully factored into the stock price. So in a world of recession and lower oil prices, you're going to have lower cost economies of scale. The stocks will do well. In a world of higher oil prices, notwithstanding the wheels coming off the rest of the economy, they'll do even better. So I like them in both states of the world.
Awesome. Thanks for your take, Jim. We appreciate it. There could be a recession, there could be rising prices, and those stocks will work either way. We appreciate it. Well, everyone at home, thank you so much for tuning in. 2024 is unfolding. Here it is. And if you want the takes that no one else is publishing, please make sure you give us a like below at Paradigm Press. Subscribe to our channel. We'll be continuing to publish ideas, research, Jim's predictions, and more. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.